I was going to get up and have this big talk about how the final story in the Shannara saga, the current side, I'm wrong, of course, because there's one more to come. I thought it was only going to be 3. That teaches me to pay attention to his website. You guys probably all know that. So he's here for the Stiehl Assassin, but I have no idea what Terry will read, because whatever I say, Terry will read something else just to mess with me. So without further ado, please, before I forget, cashier over there in case you still need to buy stuff, because we know the store's closed. We don't want you to go, but you guys closed the doors. So afterwards, you need to buy a book. You can sneak around the kiosk and buy books, and we'll have the line go row by row from here. So we try to keep it orderly. Do not trample your friends, please. I hate to fill out the reports. It's a lot of work. Anyway, what more can I say? Let's welcome the man, Terry Brooks.
Yeah, it works, all right? Okay, can you hear me now? 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 No. Now? Crappy sound system. How about that? See, a little Yankee ingenuity every single time. Okay, so here we are again, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's pretty nice out there now after kind of a gray day. I drove up from Oregon, and there was hardly any traffic coming down here. So I feel like I'm ready for bed. However, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to chat with you, and because this is only the third book of 4 in the endless slog to the end of this series after 40 years, what can I say? I have nothing further to say about this series. It's going to be over next year. I have written the last book. I'm editing it now. It's a stunning accomplishment. I had Donald Trump read it. Well, he looked at it anyway. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. I think it's going to be satisfying to everybody to see that there's a wrap up to things that makes some sense. At least I thought it made some sense. So next year, let's start with this. Next year, I'm doing 2 books. Which is fairly unusual. I've done it before, but not very often. So I'm doing the 4th book in the Shannara series, the Fall of Shannara, I should say, the 4th book. I remember it so well. So I'm doing that, and that will come out again right around now, end of May, beginning of June, something like that, unless, of course, my editor says this is a piece of crap, go do it again. But if she does that, I'm going to, I'll be moving to some other country. So let's assume that's not going to happen. Then I'm also putting out a book of shorter fiction. And that will come out, and I've been working on this on and off since '93, actually. That was Imaginary Friends. So some of it you will have read before. Some of it you will not have read before, because I just wrote it. So if you have read it before, I want to know why. And so I'm doing some stories from Magic Kingdom, some stories from Shannara, a novella, whatever, from Word and Void. That is, in fact, a sequel to Imaginary Friends and tells you what happened to Jack McCall after he grew up. And then there's a couple stories in there. One I did for Poul Anderson's anthology after he passed away, and a couple other things in there. So it's a big book, actually. It's probably bigger than my other one. I don't know when you put them all together. So look for that in September or so of next year. It's all my short fiction, probably not in the past, but probably forever, because I'm not sure I'm ever going to do any more. I think I'm... Anyway, so here, we're going to do the usual thing here. I'm going to read you, but special treat, because you are the first, and you're also the most loyal, I might add, and the best looking. I am going to read to you from a book that isn't even written yet. I'm going to read to you from the book that I intend to write after I finish the Shannara cycle, which will be the beginning of the new epic fantasy series I'm going to write. This is the first 5.5 pages of that book, subject to change without notice. But as of right now, this is going to be it. So this is how it goes. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. I'm just going to let you listen to what I have to say here. The day might have been conjured from the sweetest memory imaginable. The sky was so blue it hurt the eyes to look too closely into its depths. What clouds were visible were thin and horizontal, narrow striations that only made the blue seem brighter. Sunlight blazed down across the land, warm and reassuring, and it occurred to Hagen Tritz that here was a day he might not see again for a long time. But his were dark memories, children of a darker worldview, because life had not treated him kindly. When he crested the final rise in the roadway, one that navigated the last of a series of increasingly higher foothills, he found himself facing directly towards Mount Neheru's massive bulk. He knew he would find her there, this mountain queen, this imposing presence, for he had traveled the road many times, and always with growing expectation as he neared this heart-stopping vista. There was nothing like her. No other mountain, no other tableau or panorama or natural phenomenon that could begin to compare. Go where you would, and he had gone many places outside his homeland, you could not find anything to match her. She was the queen of all this land and all that populated it, rising high above everything, nature's greatest creation, a work of art that was visible from every point in every direction. She was immense, high, wide, and massive in a way nothing else with which he was familiar could approach. She was a thing of eternity, immutable, unchangeable, unvanquished, and solitary. There were those who would attest to all these truths. Their numbers would have been tripled if the dead could be consulted, but the dead did not speak to the living. Had they been able to do so, Hagen Tritz might have found some semblance of peace in his life. The bladesmith stopped in the middle of the roadway, bringing his wagon and its wares to a clanking halt, old Tanner clomping another step or two before acquiescing to a rest. Head lowered, the old horse nibbled the grasses by the roadside that jumped their intended boundaries and entered the traffic lanes, paying no attention to what rose above him. Hagen climbed down and breathed deeply of the sweet countryside air, taking in the taste and smells of grasses and wildflowers. His eyes lingered on Mount Neheru, tracing the lines of her rugged cliffs, cracks and crevices, slides and runoffs, and other shapes and forms that time and weather had etched in her bulk. He could do this from the bottom up and from the very top down, but only to a clearly defined point, because either way he could only go as far as the girdle of mists that encircled her. Once there, come from either top or bottom, all chance of discerning anything ceased. It was said that mountains made their own weather, and Hagen thought it must be true here especially. No one knew why the mists gathered as they did about the midsection of the mountain. With other mountains, they would be wrapped solely about the peaks, or scattered both high and low in swatches, which would shift to thicken or thin with changes in the weather. But the mists of Mount Neheru never changed their look or their position. Instead, they girdled the mountain in the same fashion, night and day during all 4 seasons. An oddity of nature on a whim of the gods. Take your choice. Believe what you wished. But the fact of it was indisputable, and Hagen often pondered if this was why she remained so much a mystery to the population she watched over. Something more than anyone can understand, wouldn't you say, Tanner? He said quietly to his horse, but Tanner did not look up. Hagen continued looking at the mountain. He was a big man, measurably so against his fellows, male or female, and he was accustomed to viewing them by looking down. He stood 6 feet 7 and weighed almost 20 stone, so he was seldom overshadowed. But in the presence of Mount Neheru, he felt incredibly small. No, more than small. He felt he was reduced to less than nothing. A jingle of harness brought him around to find an old man approaching, come from the direction in which Hagen was traveling, accompanied by a shaggy donkey laden with cookware and tools. The old man was gray from head to foot, hair, beard, clothing, and his ancient weathered skin. The stranger was breathing hard, presumably from the exertion he had expended getting this far, and when his donkey trundled to a stop, he leaned on it for support. "Well met," he greeted cheerfully, his smile warm. "And you," Hagen replied. A tinker and all-around handyman from the look of him, he thought. Been on the road all his life. The world was his home. "Come far today?" "Oh, from down the road a piece, a town called Naystock. Good business there for a man with his wits and a few skills. You?" "Not so much. I'll do better at the forts encircling White Bend. Soldiers need their blades sharpened and their skills with it." "Oh, you teach fighting arts then? Tricks of close-in combat?" Hagen shrugged. "A little." The newcomer stuck out his hand. "Pendleton Purdab, Purdy to my friends. Pleased to meet you." Hagen Tritz. The old man's face changed instantly. The look on his face suggested he was seeing the bladesmith clearly for the first time. "You're him, are you? The one who—" "Let's leave that be," Hagen interrupted sharply. "I don't like to talk about it." "Oh, no, of course. Shouldn't have to, should you? Apologies for asking." There was real fear in his eyes, and it made Hagen feel mean-spirited. He reached out and clapped the other on the shoulder, looking back at the mountain. "I stop here every time I come through. How can I not? Something this extraordinary deserves your respect and commands your attention. You find it to be that way?" "Surely do." A hesitant smile. "Here's something that's thousands of years old, crafted by nature's hand. Think of what she's endured. Think of what she's borne witness to. We are babes compared to her, and hardly worthy of having her shelter." "It could be so. I would not be the man to suggest otherwise. If those dead who tried to find out for themselves could come to tell us something, I imagine they would agree." The other nodded. "There's stories, you know, lots of stories, all of them about that mountain and who might live atop her. A mage, they say, a mage who can turn into a demon, or a demon who can change into a mage. No difference. We're all its subjects, they say. No proof of any of it, of course, but the talk never stops. Probably never will. Such is the nature of gossip about mages and demons and sacred places." Hagen stretched. "Now then, I've got to get on. I've lingered too long already. I've another 20 miles to cover by nightfall, and old Tanner here is already prepared to call it a day. Do you go far?" The old man pulled a face. "Don't push myself so hard these days. Got too many years under my belt to risk the few I've got left. I'll sleep outside tonight. Go on in the morning." He looked down the length of road that waited. "Best get started, I guess. Good speaking with you. Safe travels, bladesmith." He moved away a little more quickly than he needed to, but Hagen Tritz was used to people reacting that way. It never took more than the mention of his name to summon the reaction he had just witnessed. He must have seen it 1,000 times. The name was enough. Everyone knew the story. He watched until old Purdy was well away and then climbed back up and settled himself on the wagon seat. He paused another minute to gaze upon the mountain. He knew the stories of what it was claimed lived there. High up on the peaks, beyond where climbers could reach, though many had tried, was a fortress keep, dark and empty save for the mage demon that lived there. Many had tried to ascend the slopes of Mount Neheru, braving the suffocating mists to reach the openness of the higher elevations. Some had turned back. Some had carried on. None of the latter had ever returned. Of the former, a few had gone mad, the stories of what they had encountered chilling. A mix of fearful sightings, of terrible creatures, of death's hand reaching out to ensnare them. None of those who had returned, gone mad or stayed sane, had ever entirely been the same afterwards. Whatever lived up there, if in truth anything or anyone did, it kept to itself and was never seen, not in its lair and not in the villages and fortresses and cities of the lands it watched over. Now and then there were occurrences of an unexpected and unusual nature, and always it was said that the gods or their messengers were demonstrating their power and their presence to the unbelievers. Always it was claimed the mage or the demon or whatever combination might be acting in service to the gods had delivered a message. It was the fault of those who received those messages if they didn't understand what they meant. But never doubt that the inhabitants of Mount Nehru were always watching and always ready to set straight the humans over which they commanded the power of life and death. Hagen Tritz was neither a believer in the gods or whatever messages they might send. He had ceased believing much of anything after his life had been stolen and his future had been reduced to what it was. He jiggled the reins, and old Tanner started off, easing them along the hilltop road. What happened with demons and mages and gods had nothing to do with him. So he thinks, right? Okay. So anyway, I'll be writing that in the fall, publishing it in 21. So stay tuned. I do have a title, but I'm not telling you. I'll talk about that next year with the last book, when I'm a little more fully formed and I've written something, feel comfortable about it. But that's my new direction, and you'll see that. My mic's off?
There it is.
How about now? How about now? Okay, anyway, you don't need to, yeah, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I'll try to keep it at this level. I don't have anything more to say about that, so I'm going to let that go. I'm just going to say, does anybody have a question at this point? I don't want to drag this out too long. Yes, sir. Don.
Yeah, thank you. This new book you're writing, at one time you talked about sometimes occasionally going back in this genre and writing just standalone novels. Is that idea gone now? Or?
Let's just say everything, the question is, have I given up the idea of writing standalone Shannara novels? No. I never give up any idea. It is on the back burner. So is that for the moment. But all these things just lay out there waiting for a time when it seems right. But right now, I just feel like I need to, I don't know why this is, do one more big fantasy and something different than what I've done before. You get that itch periodically. So this is my shot at it right here. Yes, sir.
How many books is that one going to be? 30?
Well, is it going to be 30 books? If it is, by the time we get to number 20, I'll be wheeled in to make this presentation. And maybe I won't be able to make it in a lucid manner either. So I don't know. I'm shooting for a shorter term here for the whole thing. At the moment, I'm only looking at 2 books. And maybe there'll be more, but I don't think another big, long fantasy series is in the cards. I will probably drift from this over to something else pretty fast. And that will depend on a lot of things. Yes, sir.
You wrote a book called Warriors?
Warrior.
Warrior, okay. And that's about the word in the void?
Yes.
Is it going to be published, or is it going to remain in electronic form? Because all I got was electronic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot it was out there for a while. That was only for 90 days. You're probably one of the few that got hold of it. So this is about Warrior. Warrior is the Word and Void story, which is going to be in print form in the book that's coming out next year. And it was briefly. Some of the others, too, some of the Shannara stories were also only in electronic form, but I promised they would be in print form. And I always keep my promises, mostly. So these stories that have only been in digital form or whatever, they will show up as print books, as a print book collection next fall. Yeah, that's for sure. I know this. I was promised. Anybody else have a question? I know you. What can I help you with, sir?
Well, Facebook tells me that you've recently been involved in a change of
residence, and I wonder how a writer, if you found some tips on how to keep your writing organized and moving while you're moving, works.
Did everybody hear that one? Should I repeat it? No? All right, well, the answer to the question of how does a writer stay organized is you just do, somehow. I am moving. I just left my house. I am now, as I stand before you, not only sleepless in Seattle, but homeless in Seattle. So I have to, drift from hotel to hotel for a little bit. And it's difficult. I've been writing this book the whole time. I just finished it in the beginning of May. Yeah, that's what I said. Wow. With a flourish. It's done. It's done. And then this I wrote earlier when I needed a break and I wanted to set a tone for where I was going to go with this next book in the fall when I allow myself to think about it a little bit more. I don't know. Upheaval's not good for me, and I don't think it's good, particularly good for writers in general, because unless you're a fly by the seat of your pants, organic, take the punches and roll with them kind of guy, which I am not entirely that person. You do need to have some organization in your life, especially if you're old and cranky like I am. You need to have those tropes and those reassurances that come from having a stable existence. So this has been very tough. It's been very tough, and I think I probably took a couple wrong turns before I straightened them out along the way too. Hopefully I got all of them. And after this I'll be back in some kind of a normal life, so I hope that'll quiet things down and I won't have to do this ever again. This is 32 years of stuff.
Where are you heading, Terry?
Nearest home.
We will miss you as a local.
I will be here. I live on the Oregon coast part of the time already, and I will get something locally here as well. Probably not in the city. Definitely not in the city. But within striking distance so that I can keep up my obligations for returning here on a regular basis and some of the other stores. And still enjoying the city because I do love Seattle, and I don't want to just blow it off because of traffic and things that irritate me all the time. People, Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir.
So, sir, I gotta ask, being in the Army, Princess of Landover, loved it when I was in Nasiriyah, Iraq, helped keep my mind off the desert, but I gotta ask you this after being over 30 years. So, without saying too much, the biggest loose end that you have is with Brienne. So
which?
can we expect maybe closure on her part, or stay tuned?
All right. If you didn't hear that, the question is, from this gentleman, is am I finally going to resolve Brienne Olmsford's fate after kicking her all over the place for about 12 books? How many think that this is a good idea? How many think it's a bad idea? I should just leave her over in the Forbidding? Okay. Well, you'll all want to read the last book.
We already knew that.
Because yes, there's going to be a presence. Brienne Olmsford has a presence in the story, and it's integral to the resolution of much of what has happened as well. So I don't think you'll be disappointed, unless of course you never want to see her again. Then you'll be sort of disappointed. I told you, if you were listening closely, I told you in the beginning that one of the things I had set out to do with this last series is to go back in time and pick up on things and characters and different aspects of the story that resonated with people back when, and that I thought you'd like to see one more time. See, that's why I brought back Shea Olmsford. Only it's, of course, not the Shea Olmsford, it's just this other Shea Olmsford. But things like that, yeah, and of course, Gran Osford is kind of seminal to the whole series, so yeah, she's going to be back in it, as well as some other things that aren't so pleasant. Yes, sir.
So, Shannara's been part of my life longer than my wife has. 27 years.
You have chosen poorly.
How do you feel about it ending?
How do I feel about the Shannara series ending? I'm happy to end it. I feel like I've given it everything it needs to have, and probably more than I should have. I'm happy with the way I've resolved the story, because I did have a resolution in mind when I started out, and I think I've gotten to where I wanted to get to with that resolution. And I feel like, if whatever time I have left needs to go some other direction. I'm kind of burned out. So that's why I've been doing other things, and occasionally writing something else, and Street Freaks amongst them, and I just feel like it's time to do more of that. You agree? Yeah, it just is. I don't want to say, well, he wrote some great books, but they were all about the same thing. So by and large, he bored the hell out of me. I don't want that on my tombstone, so I'm going to attempt to get past all that. Oh God, that's funny. Dwayne was mentioning Pierce Brown. I just spent some time with Pierce a month or two ago, and he says, "Are you finally done with that series? You're making the rest of us look bad." I say, "Yeah, all right, leave me alone." We'll see how far you are after you're through Iron Gold and Platinum, whatever, Blonde, and so forth. Then we'll talk about your situation. Okay, anybody? What time is it? We just have some time. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Street Freaks.
Thank you.
Will you be doing another?
Will I do another Street Freaks? I don't know.
Or something of the.
This was kind of a one-off, and I've got mixed feelings about it. I kind of like the ambiguousness of the ending. But obviously it has a place to go. I actually have the next book in my head. I know the title and everything. But I'm not ready to write it yet, so I'm just going. And I thought this book would not do very well, and it didn't disappoint me.
Yeah.
No, that's the joke. It did good. For what it was, it did all right. But departures, the thing about doing a story like Street Freaks, it was the same thing with Magic Kingdom. Everybody said, "That's great. When's the next Shannara book?" I said, "What?"
Yeah.
And then I wrote Word and Void. Oh, nobody cared about that one. But these books have a way of coming back around. So this one's come back a lot faster, and we're getting some traction on that. So we'll see. As soon as I get a movie made, you see. Okay. A couple more questions. We'll call it a night. Anybody else have anything they want to ask? We may be done then. Okay.
One.
All right.
Really awesome. Of all the lands you've traveled, where's the best ale?
Where's the best ale?
Talk about the ale, the ale skews, the drinking ale. This is the great.
Yeah.
Where's the ale?
Well, we talked. Yeah. Where's the best ale? And you know what? For years, people had said, "Why don't you do the Shannara cookbook?" And I said, "Well, it would be one page. Ale, cheese, and bread. That's it. Nobody ever gets anything else." I don't drink ale. I don't. I drink wine and occasionally beer, but I don't drink ale. So I am not the person to ask about where the best ale is, and I'm sure you'd get a good argument about that one anyway. Yeah, I wish I could give you a more definitive answer. This is your third question. This is it.
Second.
Second? Okay.
In the Landover series, the Princess of Landover was the end.
Yeah.
But at the end, the witch who was turned into a crow was let loose.
Yeah.
And that's like, we know she's going to come back with fire and brimstone for something, but
Yeah.
are you going to write anything more about that?
Maybe.
Okay.
I've always said that as soon as they make the Magic Kingdom movie, I would write the next book. And I don't know, there's life yet, as they say. There's life in the Shannara series too. So don't give up quite yet. But I don't believe it. You don't believe in. I don't believe in magic. All right. So thank you for coming. Appreciate it very much. And on a night like this, I thought you'd all be at the Mariners game, so I was kind of surprised to find you all here. But I guess you're not. You're not those kinds of people. Thank you very much. I'll be here as usual. I'll sign your books as long as you need me to be here to sign them. You know, if you have a lot, please wait to the end. I'm not going anywhere. Dwayne says I can stay here tonight since I don't have a home anyway. Thank you all for coming.